The moment my mother laughed at me, she thought the story was over. She didn't realize she'd just written the opening scene of her own humiliation. My name is Lena Holloway. I'm 29 years old. And on the night my family decided I was the joke, I quietly decided I'd be the lesson. This happened last Thanksgiving in a glass-walled mountain lodge overlooking Lake Crescent. The kind of place where the forks are heavier than your phone and everyone pretends they're happier than they are. My family loves places like that. They love optics, titles, applause. I don't fit any of that. At least, not the version of me they think they know. I was wearing a charcoal cardigan I'd owned for years, hair pulled back because I'd driven 6 hours straight after a double shift. I work as a night operations coordinator for a logistics company. It's not glamorous, but it's real work, honest work, and it pays my rent. My mother hates that sentence. Dinner had been flowing for a while. Wine refilled too often. Stories repeated louder each time. And then my mom stood up, not to toast the holiday, not to thank anyone, to perform. She tapped her spoon against her glass and smiled that smile she saves for audiences. I'm just so grateful, she said, eyes gliding around the table, that I raised 2 daughters. People leaned in. That was the first warning sign. One, she continued, gesturing proudly, is a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. Brilliant. Successful. Everything you hope your child becomes. My sister beamed. Of course she did. And the other, my mom said, turning toward me, head tilted like she was amused, is still trying to figure life out. You know, hustling, floating, doing her thing. Laughter came fast. Too fast. Someone added, at least she's creative, right? Another voice joked, surviving builds character. My chest tightened, but I stayed still. Then my mom finished it. Every family needs contrast, she said. Otherwise success wouldn't shine so bright. That's when the table really laughed. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded. Calm. Quiet. Dangerous. Because while they thought they were laughing at me, they had no idea who they were laughing with. Hold on, before we get into the real stuff, I want to know, what are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? Cooking? Driving? Lying awake at night? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Back at that table, my dad chimed in, swirling his drink. You still sleeping on couches? He asked casually. Character building, my uncle added. I watched the fire crackle in the stone hearth. Watched reflections of people who thought they knew me flicker on the glass walls. And I realized something important. They had built an entire narrative about my life, based on what I never corrected. They didn't know why I'd left my previous job. They didn't know why I worked nights. They didn't know why I kept my life small and quiet. And most importantly, they didn't know who I'd been working with for the last 11 months. I stood up, not dramatically. No speech. No scene. I picked up my coat, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the door. My mom called after me, still smiling. Don't be sensitive, Lena. We're just joking. I turned back just once. I know, I said. That's why it's funny. And I left. Outside, the cold hit hard. My breath fogged instantly. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from anticipation. Because in my phone were 3 unread messages, all from the same person. The one person at that table who actually knew the truth. The one person arriving tomorrow. And when they walked into that lodge, the laughter would stop. By the time I reached my car, my phone vibrated again, and this time I smiled. I sat there with the engine off, watching snow drift across the windshield like static on a screen. The lodge glowed behind me, warm and golden, full of people who believed the story they'd just told about me. I unlocked my phone. Message 1 was from Marcus. Landing tomorrow at 9:10 a.m. Everything's still on schedule. Message 2 followed. Board approved the final review. Message 3 was shorter. He never wasted words. They won't see it coming. Marcus Reed wasn't family. He wasn't a friend. He was my former regional director, and now the COO of a private compliance firm that specialized in uncovering financial misconduct. The kind that ruined reputations quietly. The kind people like my parents never thought could touch them. I typed back with steady fingers. Everything's ready. Here's what my family didn't know. 11 months earlier, I hadn't failed out of my corporate job. I'd been recruited out of it. My old company handled vendor contracts for luxury hospitality groups, ski resorts, private lodges, places exactly like the one my parents loved to parade through. During an audit, I noticed something off. Small numbers, repeated names, shell vendors that didn't quite exist. When I flagged it, management told me to ignore it. When I didn't, Marcus called me directly. "You have a good eye," he'd said, "and a stronger spine." I took the offer he made that night. Lower pay up front, long hours, absolute silence. In exchange, training, equity, and one rule: let the truth mature before you reveal it. So, I worked nights. I stayed vague. I let my family believe I was drifting. Because people who underestimate you never see the blade coming. Back in my car, I pulled onto the road, heart pounding with something close to relief. Tomorrow was the annual Holloway Gratitude Brunch. My mother's favorite tradition. A second performance where extended family, business friends, and donors gathered to celebrate success. And this year, my parents had invited a guest of honor, Marcus. They thought he was coming to discuss a partnership, a donation, something that would make them look important. They had no idea he'd requested the invite. Or why. The next morning, I arrived early. Different outfit, black blazer, hair down, calm face. I watched my mother flutter around the dining room, directing staff, correcting napkin folds. When she saw me, she blinked. "Oh," she said. "You cleaned up." I smiled. Big day. She didn't hear the edge. Guests filtered in. Compliments flew. My sister arrived to applause. And then the doors opened again. Marcus walked in quietly. No entourage. No theatrics. Just presence. He shook hands, introduced himself, thanked my parents for hosting. My mother was glowing.
"We're so honored," she said.
"Lena used to work under you." Briefly. Marcus looked at me then, just for a second, and nodded. "Yes," he said. "She did." Brunch began. Conversations overlapped. Mimosas clinked. And then my father leaned toward Marcus, laughing. "You know how kids are," he said. "Some of them make it. Some of them take longer." Marcus set his glass down. "Actually," he said evenly, "that's not quite accurate." The room shifted. Chairs stilled. My mother's smile froze. Marcus continued. "Lena currently leads 3 active investigations for our firm. 2 of them involve hospitality groups operating in this region." Silence fell like a dropped plate. My mom laughed weakly. "Oh, I'm sure she helps. She's always been observant." Marcus turned fully toward her. "No," he said. "She's been indispensable." And then he reached into his folder. That's when I realized, I thought, watching my parents' faces drain of color, this wasn't revenge. This was accountability. And the folder hadn't even opened yet. My uncle cleared his throat. Someone whispered my sister's name. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and controlled. Marcus rested his hand on the folder, but didn't open it yet. He let the weight of anticipation do the work. My mother tried to recover, adjusting her necklace, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "Well," she said, "this is unexpected." Marcus's eyes never left hers. "Unexpected is usually where the truth lives," he replied. I met my mother's gaze then, really met it, and for the first time in my life, she looked unsure of the story she'd been telling. The room felt smaller, tighter, like a breath being held too long, right before something breaks. No one spoke. Everyone thought the folder held contracts. I knew better. It held months of silence, finally learning how to speak. Marcus opened it slowly, not to reveal papers, but to reveal patience. "Before we discuss partnerships," he said, voice calm, "there are disclosures required when conflicts of interest exist." My father frowned. "Conflicts?" Marcus nodded. "Several hospitality vendors connected to this lodge are under federal review. Some names may sound familiar. He slid one document forward. My mother leaned in, then froze. The name printed at the top belonged to my father's consulting firm. For a second, no one breathed. Then my dad laughed too loudly. That can't be right, he said. We advise dozens of properties. Yes, Marcus replied, and bill for services never rendered. A murmur rippled through the room. I felt it like electricity along my arms. My mother's hand trembled as she set down her glass. Marcus continued. Lena identified the discrepancies. She traced shell vendors, duplicate invoices, and payment loops designed to avoid detection. Every sentence stripped another layer from the story they'd built about me. My sister finally looked at me, not with pride, with confusion, like she was meeting a stranger. This is absurd, my mother said sharply. Why are you bringing this up here? Marcus didn't raise his voice. Because this gathering includes investors and donors directly impacted. The word donors landed like a slap. I spoke then. My voice surprised even me. You taught me to pay attention, I said to my mother. I just listened. Her eyes flashed. You could have come to us. I did, I replied. You laughed. Silence again. Thicker now. Marcus closed the folder halfway. This isn't an accusation, he said. It's an opportunity for transparency before formal action proceeds. My father's face had gone pale. What formal action? Subpoenas, Marcus answered. Audits. Freezes. Someone pushed back their chair. Another guest stood, murmuring about fresh air. The room was unraveling. My mother reached for my arm. Lena, she whispered, tones suddenly soft. We're family. I gently removed her hand. Family doesn't humiliate you for applause. Her mouth opened. No words came. In that moment, I realized revenge didn't feel like triumph. It felt like balance. Marcus gathered the documents. We'll continue privately, he said. But understand this began because someone here was underestimated. He nodded toward me. The guests avoided my eyes as they filed out. My sister lingered. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. I shrugged. You never asked.
She swallowed hard.
When the room emptied, my parents stood surrounded by evidence and echoes. My mother finally spoke. What do you want? I considered the question. Nothing, I said. I already have what I needed. Which is? My father asked quietly. The truth, I answered. Out loud. I picked at my coat. At the door, I paused. Oh, I added. This is just the beginning. Behind me, I heard my mother sit down heavily. The chair scraped like a confession. No one rushed to comfort her now. The room that once echoed with laughter held only consequences. My father stared at the table. His hands looked older somehow, smaller. He asked Marcus about timelines, about options, about damage control. Marcus answered politely, clinically, like a doctor explaining an illness that could have been prevented. I stayed silent, not out of cruelty, out of respect for the truth doing its work. For years, I'd imagined this moment differently, louder, sharper. But this quiet reckoning felt more powerful. There were no insults left to throw. Reality had taken over. My mother finally looked at me again. Did you plan this? She asked. I shook my head. I prepared for it. There's a difference. Preparation is what you do when you expect resistance. Planning is what you do when you expect control. I never wanted control. I wanted honesty. Marcus checked his watch. We should go, he said to me. I nodded. As we walked out together, I felt eyes on my back, not mocking anymore. Measuring. In the hallway, Marcus leaned close. You understand this will get ugly, he said. I know, I replied. But it won't be invisible anymore. He smiled slightly. That's usually enough. We stepped outside together. Snow fell softly, marking the end of pretending and the beginning of irreversible change for everyone. The fallout didn't explode immediately. It crept, slow, surgical, exactly the way truth likes to move when it finally has permission. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Missed calls from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Texts that started with, I don't know what to say, and ended with, but your mom is devastated. As if devastation were a surprise. As if it hadn't been carefully planted, watered, and applauded for decades. I didn't answer. Instead, I went back to work. Night shift. Headphones in. Screens glowing. Evidence stacked neatly where excuses used to live. Marcus was right. This was going to get ugly. But ugly doesn't scare you once you've lived inside someone else's contempt long enough. By Wednesday, subpoenas were issued. Quietly. No sirens. No headlines yet. Just certified envelopes and tightened jaws. My father's accounts were flagged. My mother's nonprofit paused all fundraising pending review. That phrase became her nightmare. She showed up at my apartment Thursday evening. I knew it was her before I opened the door. She knocked the way she always did when she wanted sympathy.
Soft.
Rhythmic. Practiced. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup. No audience. Just a woman holding a handbag like a shield. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning my living room. The thrifted couch. The neat shelves. The quiet dignity of a life she'd never bothered to understand. I didn't know, she said, sitting down. About your father. About any of it. I leaned against the counter. You knew enough. She flinched. I never meant to hurt you. You meant to impress people, I replied. I was collateral. Her eyes filled. Real tears this time, not the stage kind. You embarrassed us. I nodded. You taught me how. Silence stretched. Then she asked the question she'd been circling since Aspen. Why didn't you tell us who you were becoming? I thought about it. About every dinner where my job was dismissed. Every joke sharpened at my expense. Because you only value success when it flatters you. She covered her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. It was the first apology I could remember. It landed softly. Too late to undo anything, but heavy enough to matter. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I'm doing it so the truth doesn't have to hide anymore. She looked up. What happens now? That depends, I answered, on how honest you're willing to be. She left an hour later. Not fixed. Not forgiven. But quieter. Humbled. That night, my sister called. I didn't protect you, she said immediately. No preamble. I let them compare us because it benefited me. I closed my eyes. I know. Can we start over? She asked. Maybe, I said. But it'll look different. She agreed. Weeks passed. The story leaked, despite everyone's efforts. Not with my name attached, but whispers spread. Investors pulled back. Boards resigned. My parents' carefully polished image cracked in public. Not shattered. Cracked enough to let light in. And me? I was promoted. Equity finalized. My name added to the firm's leadership page. No announcement. No toast. Just an email and a quiet handshake for Marcus. Validation without spectacle. Exactly how I liked it. One evening, as I locked up the office, I caught my reflection in the dark glass. Same woman. Same thrifted coat. But my posture was different. Straighter. Rooted. Revenge had never been my goal. Release was. Because the most powerful response to humiliation isn't proving them wrong loudly. It's letting the truth walk into the room calmly and watching lies scramble for exits. And the scariest part?
This still wasn't the end.
The next twist didn't come from my parents. It came from someone who had been watching quietly from the sidelines the entire time. 3 weeks after the brunch, Marcus asked me to join a closed-door meeting. No agenda, just a calendar block labeled Strategic Exposure. That alone made my stomach tighten. Inside the conference room sat 2 board members I hadn't met yet and a woman in a navy coat who introduced herself as an investigative journalist. Her name was Harper Cole. She specialized in long-form corporate accountability stories, the kind that didn't just report scandals, but dismantled myths. She slid a recorder onto the table. I want to tell your story, she said, looking directly at me. Not theirs. Yours. I didn't answer immediately. Marcus leaned back. This is optional, he said, but the timing matters. Harper continued. Your family's case is becoming a symbol.
Privilege.
Public cruelty. Quiet competence being mistaken for failure.
She paused.
People recognize themselves in you. That was the part that scared me. Stories have momentum. Once released, they don't belong to you anymore. I asked the only question that mattered. Will my parents' names be in it? Yes, she said honestly, but not as villains, as examples. I took a breath. The room waited. I'll do it, I said. On one condition. Harper smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The article dropped 10 days later. It didn't go viral the way cheap drama does. It spread slowly, thoughtfully, like a mirror being passed from hand to hand. The headline didn't mention money or crime. It read, "The daughter they laughed at was paying attention." My inbox flooded. Messages from strangers who'd been underestimated. From daughters. From sons. From people who'd been labeled the other in their own families. The comments weren't cruel. They were grateful. And then my mother called. Not crying. Not defensive.
Come.
I read it, she said. And I asked. I didn't recognize myself, she admitted. And that terrified me. That was new. She told me donors had pulled out permanently. Friends had stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The audience she'd lived for had moved on. I don't know who I am without applause, she said quietly. I chose my words carefully. That's something only you can figure out. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Not triumphant. Thoughtful. Revenge stories make it seem like victory is loud.
Clean.
It isn't. It's reflective. At work, my role expanded.
I was assigned to train new analysts.
People fresh out of school, eager, unsure. I recognized myself in them. I made sure no one laughed when they asked questions. No one dismissed their instincts. One night, a junior analyst stayed late. How did you learn to stay invisible like that? She asked. I smiled. By being ignored. Months passed. Legal proceedings continued. Settlements negotiated. Careers ended quietly. My parents downsized. Sold the lodge memberships. Sold the image. On my 30th birthday, my sister came over with takeout and no expectations. We ate on the floor. Laughed carefully. Honestly, I'm proud of you, she said. I believed her. That night, I opened my grandmother's necklace, the one I'd worn in Aspen. Inside was a tiny inscription I'd never noticed before. Stand where truth can see you. I closed it gently, because the final revenge wasn't exposure. It was becoming undeniable. Just when I thought the story had settled into something quiet and manageable, my mother did the one thing I didn't expect. She asked me to meet her publicly. Not for lunch. Not for reconciliation. For a panel. The invitation arrived via email, forwarded from a nonprofit leadership conference she used to headline every year. This time, her name was listed with an asterisk. Former executive director. The session title made my stomach drop. Raising Successful Children. When Perception Fails Reality. And beneath it, two speakers. My mother. And me. I stared at the screen for a long time. Marcus's reply came minutes later. You don't owe her this. He was right. I didn't. But something about the request felt different from everything before. There was no audience of friends to impress. No donors to charm. Just professionals. Strangers. People who wouldn't laugh on cue. I agreed. The auditorium was half full when I arrived. Neutral space. No luxury. No performance lighting. My mother stood backstage, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked at me. Really looked. Thank you for coming, she said. I'm not here to protect you, I replied. She nodded. I know. We walked on stage together. No applause. Just polite attention. The moderator introduced us and asked the first question. What happens, he said, when a family confuses image with achievement? My mother swallowed, then spoke. I did, she said simply. I confused them. The room stilled. She talked about pressure. About comparisons disguised as motivation. About how she'd learned to measure worth by reaction instead of reality. She didn't excuse herself. She didn't dramatize it. She owned it. Then the microphone passed to me. I talked about silence, about how being underestimated can become camouflage, about how people reveal their ethics when they think no one important is listening. I didn't name my parents as villains. I named the system that rewarded them. Halfway through, I noticed something strange. People weren't watching my mother. They were watching me. After the panel, attendees lined up, not to scold her,
To thank me.
one woman whispered. I was the other daughter, too. A man said, I laughed at my son once. I won't again. Backstage, my mother sat heavily in a chair. That was harder than losing donors, she admitted. I believed her.
Outside, she stopped me.
I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I'm asking for distance while I figure out who I am without pretending. I nodded. That's healthy. As we parted, I felt something loosen. Not reconciliation, not closure, but release. Weeks later, Harper emailed me again. She wanted a follow-up piece. This one focused on what happens after public reckoning. I declined. Some stories, I wrote back, deserve privacy. At work, I was asked to lead a new internal initiative, training on ethical reporting, whistleblower protection. They wanted my name on it. I agreed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl once mocked for having no direction was now defining it. One night, as I left the office, I passed a group of interns laughing loudly. One stopped mid-laugh when she saw me, suddenly nervous. It's okay, I said gently. Laughing isn't the problem. Forgetting who's not laughing is. She nodded, thoughtful. Driving home, I realized something important. Revenge stories end when the villain falls. But real power begins when the pattern breaks. And I was done being part of theirs. I thought the panel would be the last public chapter. I was wrong. 6 months later, an envelope arrived at my apartment with my full name typed carefully across the front. No return address. Inside was a single letter and a legal notice folded beneath it. The handwriting was unmistakable. My father. The letter wasn't angry. That's what made it unsettling. He wrote about consequences, about friends who stopped calling, about contracts that evaporated overnight, about how everything we built vanished faster than I ever imagined. Only at the very end did he mention me. You always were smarter than we gave you credit for, he wrote. I just didn't expect you to be the one holding the match. I exhaled slowly. The legal notice was a defamation claim.
Weak. Desperate.
A bluff dressed as authority. Marcus confirmed it within minutes. He's trying to scare you, he said. There's nothing here. I know, I replied, but it tells me something. What's that? He still thinks this is about winning. The filing didn't go anywhere. Quietly dismissed. But it stirred something else, public curiosity. Old acquaintances resurfaced. Distant relatives reached out, pretending concern while fishing for details. I ignored most of them, except one. My Aunt Clara, my mother's older sister. The one who'd always slipped me extra dessert as a kid. The one who'd never laughed at the jokes. We met for coffee. She didn't waste time. They're unraveling, she said gently. And they're angry because you didn't unravel with them. I nodded. I didn't do this to hurt them. I know, she said. That's why it hurts more. She told me things I'd never known. About my mother growing up in constant comparison. About my grandfather's obsession with status. About how cruelty had been framed as motivation for generations. You didn't just expose them, Clara said. You ended something. That stayed with me. At work, our initiative launched company-wide. Anonymous reporting spiked. Issues surfaced that had been buried for years. The system was finally listening. One evening, Marcus stopped by my office. There's talk of spinning this into a public program, he said. Workshops. Speaking. I shook my head. I don't want to become a symbol. He smiled slightly. You already are. The question is whether you define it. That night, I dreamed of the Aspen Lodge, the laughter echoing, the moment I stood up. But this time, when I walked out, the room faded behind me. The sound stopped following. I woke up calm. On the anniversary of that Thanksgiving, I went somewhere else entirely. A small cabin by the coast. No signal. No audience. Just wind and water. I brought the necklace with me. Standing on the beach, I realized the revenge everyone expects, the downfall, the humiliation, the regret, isn't the real ending. The real ending is freedom. Freedom from explaining yourself. Freedom from shrinking. Freedom from carrying someone else's expectations like a debt you never agreed to owe. My phone buzzed once before I turned it off. A single message from my mother. "I'm in therapy," it read. "I'm learning to listen. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know." I stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down. Some stories don't need replies. As the sun dipped into the ocean, I felt something settle inside me. Not pride, not vengeance.
Peace.
And for the first time, I understood the quiet truth no one tells you about revenge. The moment you stop needing it is the moment you've already won. The final twist didn't happen in a courtroom, a conference room, or a headline. It happened quietly, the way real endings usually do. A year after that Thanksgiving, I received an invitation in the mail. Not an email, not a forwarded agenda, a handwritten card. My mother's handwriting, careful and restrained. It was for small dinner. No donors, no colleagues, just immediate family. Neutral location, no speeches. I debated not going. Then I realized something important. Avoidance would mean the past still had leverage, and I was done giving it any. I arrived last. The room was modest. No crystal, no audience. My parents looked older, softer around the edges. My sister stood when she saw me. This time, there was no applause, just space. Dinner was quiet,
Honest.
awkward in places, necessary. Halfway through, my mother cleared her throat. "I want to say something," she said. No one interrupted. "I spent most of my life believing love was earned through achievement," she said. "And I taught that to my children without realizing the damage." She looked at me. "I made you invisible because I didn't know how to value what I couldn't brag about." I felt the weight of that sentence. Not crushing.
Clarifying.
"I don't expect forgiveness," she continued, "but I needed to say it where it mattered, without laughter." I nodded. That was enough. After dinner, my father approached me quietly. "I lost a lot," he said, "but I learned something too late." "What's that?" I asked. "Underestimating someone doesn't make you powerful," he said. "It makes you blind." I thanked him for saying it, not because it fixed anything, but because it closed a door that no longer needed to stay open. When I left, there was no dramatic goodbye, just a calm certainty that the story had finally reached its natural end. In the months that followed, my life expanded in ways that didn't look impressive on paper. Mornings without dread, work that mattered, relationships that didn't require me to perform. I stopped introducing myself with explanations, stopped shrinking accomplishments so others wouldn't feel threatened, stopped needing anyone to finally get it. Because the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's no longer needing them to be right. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the punchline at your own table, the comparison, the disappointment someone else projected onto you, remember this. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not failure. And being underestimated is often a gift. Because when the truth finally shows up, it doesn't need to shout. It just needs space. And if this story resonated with you, if you've lived a version of it, or you're still living in the middle of it, take a second right now. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Silent Revenge Lab, where quiet strength always wins in the end. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is living so fully that the past can't reach you anymore.